Try that on. Go step into Steven Spielberg's directing chair and direct an Indiana Jones movie
let's add
around
one more layer, a global pandemic.
During a global pandemic. Somehow
putting you to the test.
Yeah. I'm still here.
Prepare your ears, humans. Happy, Sad, Confused begins now.
Today on Happy, Sad, Confused, I'm Josh Horowitz, and I'm welcoming one of my favorite filmmakers to the podcast, a man who has never shied away from a challenge, a Johnny Cash biopic, that's easy, kill off Wolverine and earn the respect of the critics, fans, and the Academy? No problem. How about stepping into the shoes of the most celebrated filmmaker ever to bid adieu to maybe the most iconic adventurer in all of cinematic history? James Mangold is the man for the job, and today his job is also to be on my podcast, finally. Jim, it's
Hallelujah.
Great to see you, man. We did it. You're there. It's good to see you, man. Somehow you've eluded the podcast for a while, but I'm excited to have you, and I'm doubly excited.
I've been eluding it. I've been unaware of my eluding it. I lived in England and around the world for the last year and a half making this huge undertaking. So
it's all good.
I've been giving you trouble.
No, all is forgiven. We get a chance to just talk about Indiana Jones for about 45 minutes. That's not a tough day at the office. All right, so let's just dig right into it, man. This task at hand is a monumental challenge, to say the least. What's it take to officially say yes, to, after you weigh all the options, to say, I'm going to dive in? Is it a little insanity, a little hubris, a little bit of like, wait, if I say no to this, I'm going to regret it the rest of my life? Put me in your head a little bit.
Well, when I first got contacted by Harrison and Steven and Kathy, and this idea was first floated to me, I was, of course, intrigued, but also freaked out because it seemed like, pinch hitting for Babe Ruth seems like a no-win proposition on some levels, and but it was the power of the company I was in that did more to get me to jump aboard than anything else. What I mean by that is just that almost all the people involved with these films are heroes of mine. Yeah. And with the exception of Harrison, I really didn't know any of them very well until this process began. And there was such warmth and such a sense of support and such an absence of political intrigue or some kind of corporate burden. It just felt like everyone wanted to make a really good movie. And it seemed like there would be a tremendous amount of freedom to do that. So the idea of getting to work intimately with lifelong cinematic heroes, with a canvas like Indiana Jones, with an actor like Harrison, who was already a friend of mine and someone who I got to know pretty well, it seemed like I could see on a very personal level a reason to do it, just to have this experience of working with all these legends. I mean, including John Williams writing the score, which I hoped he would, at that point, 90, now 91. The barrier that had to be crossed is when I saw the script that they had, I realized why the thing hadn't gelled yet, which is there was nothing innately wrong with it, but it didn't seem to be about anything, which is not necessarily out of the ordinary for movies these days.
Right.
But for me, I just didn't know why I'd be making it other than the company and the IP and that the studio wanted another Indiana Jones movie. I didn't understand why it needed to exist. And
right. Yeah. And you need that to get through the tough days. If you're going to commit 2.5 years of your life, sure, it's a fun experience to hang out with these guys, but like to keep the fire lit.
You need to, honestly, I needed to know what I'm doing, because if I'm making a movie where all I'm doing is trying to make it cool and spectacular, but I don't know what it's about.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a man in the woods without a compass. I'm kind of a pointless director. So what occurred to me very strongly was a kind of dose of a bracing dose of honesty that I just tried to see if I unloaded this on everybody, whether they'd all just run for the hills or stay with me. And what that was just that the strong feeling that this needed to be a movie about getting old, and that this is my star is pushing 80 at that point, pushing now firmly in the grasp of it, and there's no way around that. You can't make one of those pictures with a guy pretending he's 45 but in his late 60s. There's no way, there's no fudgy room. He's an old guy. And that doesn't mean you make the movie about, oh, my back aches. It means you make the movie about someone in the final chapter of their lives who is reckoning with all that's happened and what is left and to happen. And to me, the second I could envision that, the second it became a more honest film, which I feel these films have always been really at their core entertainments, but they always were about something. And so what I presented them was this idea that the movie would be about time, and that therefore, because I'm a kind of, as you know me, I'm kind of a brainiac academic about movies, and every Indiana Jones movie, the relic isn't just a relic, but the relic embodies a kind of question or mysticism or magic that relates to the theme of the whole picture. And that a movie about fatherhood ends up getting the blessing of one of the Knights of the Round Table. A movie about a kind of Asperger's-y professor who hides in books ends up being about him having to confront the power of God inside a golden box. Each movie, the relic is not just valuable or important or magical, but that the magic itself and the kind of magic it possesses ends up relating to the actual theme of that picture. And if that makes any sense. So I confronted all of them with this kind of slew of ideas. And to my great surprise, none of them ran away, and they all seemed to smile and get excited. And at that point I said, well, then here's the other problem. You have this movie dated in a way that I'd have to generate the script for this movie that doesn't exist on paper yet in the next 24 days. So we need to push the picture. At that point, that became a much bigger powwow, and they had to say goodbye, meaning I had to say, they said, so you won't do it if we don't give you significantly more time. And I said, a year. And I said, that is the deal. And they went away, and I didn't hear from them for a few weeks. And then they came back and said, okay, they might have gone out to every other director in town. Maybe they just confabbed among themselves, or maybe they just had to go upstairs to Bob Iger and Alan Horn and Alan Bergman and go, can we push the picture? And are you okay with that? And whatever had to happen, when they came back and said, we'll do it, it was also fortuitous because the Bob Dylan movie, the movie I was making about Bob Dylan in the early 60s, was also falling apart due to COVID. That was the moment of the pandemic landing on us. And it did seem to me that if they could agree, and that probably helped them push the picture as well, because we were all facing the mystery of what movie production was going to be. Although we ended up shooting the movie at the height of the pandemic anyway, but which try that on. Go step into Steven Spielberg's directing chair and direct an Indiana Jones movie around.
Let's add one more layer: global pandemic.
During a global pandemic. But somehow
putting you to the test.
Yeah. I'm still here.
You're still here, and you made a great. And by the way, and you'll get the gist of this in the course of this conversation, the movie is fantastic. I haven't said it already. It is emotionally resonant. It is the first Indiana Jones movie that has made me weep. It is a soaring adventure, and it works. And I had a grin on my face for 2 hours and 20 minutes. So congratulations.
Thank you. That was the point. The point was really to there's a minefield of expectations that people have about beloved characters and worlds, and you're never going to please everybody.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to have enough armor. I don't even think I have developed it enough to kind of deal with the people who somehow get outraged even before they've seen your movie. But the reality is that that to me, it was making, it's a difficult thing to describe, making a film that was emotionally honest, but at the same time not losing track that it is a screwball action picture. That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
and Phoebe would often could tell you about this. I often brought up with her, the Preston Sturges film The Lady Eve, and
Mhm.
Barbara Stanwyck in that film in particular, when I was thinking and we were writing her character. And it's kind of this beautiful, charming rogue who has a heart of gold, although she's a completely nefarious and
Right.
selfish character, at least when you meet her in the beginning of the picture. And um, that, for me, that quality, not just of the Lady Eve in terms of Phoebe's character, but in terms of wit, um, action, double crosses, turns, heart. When you get down to it, the Indiana Jones films, yes, they're action movies, but they're at their heart, they're also just love letters to Golden Age cinema.
1,000%. One thing I think that look, when you were announced, I was so heartened because, again, there's a very short list of filmmakers I would trust this with. And I think one of the reasons you were great for this, if I can analyze this for a second, is because we've had this conversation about franchise filmmaking and about, like, you're not one to, like, and it speaks volumes what you were saying before. I'm not going to just hit a release date just because I have to. Like, you're not interested in selling lunchboxes. You're interested in selling a store or telling a story. And one thing I think you really achieve in this, we talk a lot about fan service in years. And I want to hear from you, like, was that a balance? Was that something like, look, you want to make something in the vein, you want it to feel like an Indiana Jones movie, but, like, you could have layered a lot more in. You could have had Mads be like, it's Belloc's son. You could have had,
Oh, it gets silly. It gets silly at a certain point. And it's the term fan service is makes it sound so dirty.
Right. Checking a box. Yeah. Yeah.
And I am a fan of Indiana Jones films. I have no problem jumping into the world. I mean, I feel the same way about Star Wars movies, and I certainly felt that way when I made Logan. You can make a different movie, but also love what's come before. You
Sure.
can make a different movie and also bring back elements that have existed before. It's part of, even, my favorite Indiana Jones film is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay. So, and I have other favorites, but that's number one. And not only, but also because it's number one and it's where the world started. But the filmmaking the craft is so exquisite from the writing on upward in that movie. In the first 5 minutes, when Indy runs into Belloc, it's not a new character. He goes, "You are Belloc."
There's history. I know.
There's history. There could have been a movie before. There could have been a movie between the two of them that happened before this movie.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fan service for Phantom movies. When he meets Karen Allen for the first time, she belts him. That's their first moment together. She flattens him.
Yes.
So, well, what's that based on? The movie that happened before the movie. So when you're working in the shoes and in the shadows of such great dramatists and filmmakers like I am on this project, you're dealing with people who even do fan service to their own original movie, to the movies that didn't exist. Meaning they create backstory. You arrive in each scene in media res. The characters know each other. They're not all my name is Belloc and I'm here to take this from you. They are people who have history.
Yeah.
And so I just followed that form. In my case, there were movies that preceded me, so some of the people who march in and out are characters we know.
One character we don't see, and I'm just curious because, like, in the last year, He Kwan had an amazing year. Was there ever an iteration? Like, do you have regrets when you saw how amazing he was back on screen again? Like, oh wait, he's got the chops now as an adult. Like, did you ever consider bringing Short Round back?
I was blown away by his work in Everything Everywhere, and but that movie was shooting while we were making our movie, and
Right.
I was looking for a kid, meaning I had written this concept that required Indy and Helena. And at the point I was thinking of how we could introduce, Kay, I didn't have a space for another adult to come in the movie and have anything that wouldn't be more than kind of the worst kind of cameos. So plus he was actually shooting, and but I was looking for K at 13, meaning I was
Right.
looking to introduce what I felt like was a kind of staple of these films as family films, and also as in terms of just having the energy of a young person in the picture, a really young person, like a child. Yeah.
Do you okay? So this task completed, and hopefully you're exhaling and enjoying the victory lap, as it were. Do you have, like, I don't know, there's been so much talk. Obviously, Harrison's been 1,000% clear. He's never playing Indiana Jones again. And seemingly no one else is ever playing Indiana Jones again. I think we all agree. We hope that's the case. That seems like the right call. Do you have interest or conversations about doing anything else in the world? I know there was the Ravenwood show that was being developed. Were you involved in that? Is this kind of like,
I looked at what they were developing for that show, but I think it was purely speculative in terms of whether that show was going to happen. But it had nothing to do with Indiana Jones. It was the world, but it was not. I'm busy. I'm only 8 weeks out on a complete unknown, so
yep,
I'm busy making a radically different movie right now. But and that's how I kind of have conducted my whole career, and is always trying to vary things in size and scale. And I certainly don't want to be just there's nothing wrong with it, but the kind of IP or sequelized world is its own beast, and it's not a place I want to live permanently. It's a place I like to visit and do something if I feel like I have something I can say
right,
that makes the movie stand on its own. And I've probably kissed off a lot of work just by saying this, but I have kind of no interest in being part of a universe.
sure,
Obviously, every movie is a part of the larger world of its, but what I mean by that is that at the point the film, between its fade in and its fade out, becomes the curtain up and curtain down becomes less significant than how it's handing off to another enterprise to follow, means that I'm again without a compass. As our conversation opened, I don't know how to do that. That just
right,
feels like I'm making the world's most expensive TV show,
yep,
an episode of the world's most expensive TV show, and one episode comes out every year and a half, and I get lost in that process because
right.
I don't know how to tell the story and bring it in for a landing.
We talked a lot when Logan came out, and that was such an exceptional goodbye to that character. Is there any part of you, look, we're excited. It'll be fun to see Hugh obviously back in Deadpool in that context, a
Sure.
much different kind of a movie. At the same time, is part of you like, wait, we had the perfect send off, and this lessens the impact a tad for what Logan delivered at the end?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a part of me that felt we stick the landing, but we did it. The great thing about movies is, again, I'm just not that meta. I'm much, maybe there's a good reason Harrison and I get along so well. Maybe I'm just
Very
really like a very
practical
old,
and just,
I'm a very
yeah,
old man hiding in a slightly younger man's body. But the reality is we did end Logan well,
yep,
and it did have its impact and continues to. And I'm not really sure that anything diminishes it or takes it away. Um, in any real way. That the thing, if it works, it works, and it's not like the new movie Hugh and Ryan are working on takes place after Logan, so he doesn't. In a sense, they're just making a prequel, if you will,
right,
and tonally, because I've talked with them about this. I even was heavily talking with about him a few years ago. I'm imagining it's going to be some kind of midnight run or 48 hours with these two guys just on the run,
which sounds
bantering,
amazing. Yeah,
and yes, and it sounds fun as hell. And I don't think so, because I don't think in universes. I just think in movies. I think we did it,
yep,
and there's plenty of wonderful films that have had sequels that were different or not quite the same, and if things don't work, they vanish. That
yeah,
and
yeah,
if they work, that's awesome. So,
right. So having said that about kind of, not thinking in terms of universes, you were though developing the X-23 Laura film for a time. Did you ever have a script for that? Like how far did that go?
I never had a script. I started working on a story, and but I don't think of that as a universe. I just loved the character, and I thought Daphne is such an incredibly dazzling actress. I mean, I thought, you talk about gambles on movies. The amount of weight we put on an 11-year-old girl in that movie. I mean, it's happened. Paper Moon with Tatum
Right.
O'Neal, or The Exorcist. Um, there's movies where the child performance just shocks everyone in its depth, but she was so miraculous in that movie, and fierce, and I think people responded on so many levels to it. Even people with just difficult children recognized Logan's plight, trying to kind of deal with her. But I was really curious about how that would work. But it happened at exactly the moment Disney
It was the
bought Fox, and
casualty of the merger. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then interestingly, at that point, there was no interest in continuing any semblance of what had been the Fox Marvel universe. But how things change, and suddenly
Mutants are hot again. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now we talked for Logan Noir. Are we going to see Dylan in black and white or color? Have you considered any black and white films in your filmography since?
The only nervousness I'd have about making the Dylan movie, I'd love to make one, a Dylan in black and white, is that I just feel like we'll just be trying to look like, don't look now, but don't look
Right.
back.
Don't look back. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Don't Look Now is in color, but also the but it's an interesting question, because it's one of the big tricks and problems that is maybe on a 45-minute show is worth talking about. But one of the challenges for filmmakers making black and white films is they let you do it as an option, but the reason studios resist it, as at least this is what I encountered last time I kind of was thinking about this on a movie, the reason they resist it, or don't even resist it, refuse it, isn't just that they don't think audiences will embrace a black and white film, but that they actually have output deals around the world with streamers or cable channels that make color a requirement of the release, meaning that if you make a black and white film for a certain studio, it means that it will not air. They cannot.
Right.
It falls out of certain output deals. It may not be interesting to anyone but business people, but it creates this huge financial crisis beyond the studio executive assumption that people don't like black and white.
Yeah, I've heard that even like applying to like international, like it can't go
Yeah.
overseas. It had the expectation. Yeah. So
it's also, yes. So whenever the international community gets high and mighty about thinking they're only supporting great movies, someone should remind them that they keep any black and white films. Even I think Alexander Payne had to shoot Nebraska. They had to shoot it in color and make it black and white because of I think either some Asian release where they were required to deliver a color film.
Let's hit upon the Dylan movie, just because I'm sure that's like occupying 80% of your brain even now. It's got all my favorite people, man. I know this one's been brewing for a while. Timothee Chalamet, I caught up with Elle Fanning recently. She was very excited. You guys almost worked together on the Patty Hearst movie. I know. Benedict is going to be your Pete Seeger. Inspired casting. Congratulations on that. I guess my first question is Dylan involved? Like, do you want his participation? Have you talked to Dylan? Has Timmy interacted with Dylan?
I've spent several wonderfully charming days in his company, just one-on-one, talking to him. Yes, and I have a script that's personally annotated by him and treasured by me, and and he's a wonder. He loves movies. And so the first time I sat down with Bob, one of the first things he said to me was, "I love Copland, man." And
a man after my own heart.
Oh,
how much I love that one.
Oh my God!
Good taste.
No, this is, and by the way, it's not really a Bob Dylan biopic. What's interesting, and always was interesting about it to me, and I think the reason Bob's been so supportive of us making it is it's about as in all cases, I think the best true life movies are never a cradle to grave,
They're
but they're
tough.
about a very specific moment
Yep.
in someone's life. And in this case, it's kind of, I don't know that it might be presumptuous to call it Altman-esque, but it's a kind of ensemble piece about this moment in time in the early 60s in New York, and this 17-year-old kid with $16 in his pocket who hitchhikes his way to New York to meet Woody Guthrie, who is being kept in a hospital and is dying of a nerve disease, and sings Woody a song that he wrote for him, and befriends Pete Seeger, who's like a son to Woody. And Pete sets him up with gigs in local clubs, and there you meet Joan Baez and all these other people who are part of this world. And this wanderer who comes in from Minnesota with a fresh name and a fresh outlook on life becomes a star, assigned to the biggest record company in the world in a year, and 3 years later has record sales rivaling the Beatles. And the upheaval in what was the folk community and what they felt was proper folk and illicit folk, or all has tremendous relevance even now, because of the way we're all so tribalized, and we make rules about what our music should be, or what the rules are of how we speak or how we express ourselves. And Bob, from the beginning, has been someone who is always pressing against those boundaries, and or not even recognizing them. I think that's one of the most beautiful things I saw and felt upon meeting him, is he's still puzzled why they were so angry after Newport in 1965.
Yeah.
Because, for him, I think it's really clear that he loved Buddy Holly. He loved Little Richard. He loved, he listened to rock and roll. He didn't come to New York to become a folk sensation. He just wanted to make music. And folk is what happened and what was happening at that moment. But his dream of playing in a band, he saw Buddy Holly and the Crickets, a couple months before they died. And his dream of being in a band, in a rock band, was the primal dream of his life. And so it wasn't like he was rejecting anything as much as just trying to evolve. And it's such an interesting explosion of drama in this community in that moment in 1965 when he went electric, and the way he was viewed as a kind of Judas or a betraying angel to the movement that he had lifted into stardom. It's
We know
really an interesting world, and Timmy is working his ass off right as we speak. And
so we know he's got the acting chops. How's the singing? Is he pre-recorded the songs, or is he singing live?
We've been in rehearsals, musical rehearsals, and we lay things down just to learn from them. But the music is incredible, and he's incredible. I couldn't have more confidence in him and in all the others joining in. And I think, not unlike making an Indiana Jones movie, the expectations are high, but so is the camaraderie and the love among us. We've all been essentially working on this movie for the last 3 years. There's been a lot of preparation. When COVID took us offline, no one stopped writing, rehearsing, Timmy playing guitar, and working probably took it with him through every Dune, and probably was playing guitar as he was riding a worm.
What's that music in the Dune trailer? Oh,
yeah.
Dylan. Yeah. Another, what I would imagine will be a long gestation period. We'll talk about this for years, but you're just in the infancy, presumably, of the Star Wars project. But again, the prospect of you, Star Wars, I'm excited, sir. You were more than dabbling. You were down a road at one point. Correct me if I'm wrong, on a Boba Fett film. Yes, like is that anything like what Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett became, or was it a totally different kind of kettle of fish?
Well, at the point I was doing it, I was probably scaring the shit out of everyone, but I was probably making much more of a borderline rated R kind of spaghetti western, single planet, the spaghetti western. The world would never be able to embrace Baby Yoda if I had made that. So because it didn't really belong in the world I was kind of envisioning, but it kind of just in a moment of kind of corporate realignment after whatever happened with the Han Solo movie. They just suddenly decided they weren't making pictures like that, and I think the opportunities in streaming presented themselves.
You've made my heart break a little bit just hearing about that, Jim. Just
yeah, it was a beautiful period. I was just listening to Ennio Morricone all day, all night, and typing away. But I'm not sure it ever would have happened. I'm not sure that it was in anyone's plans what I was thinking about.
But now, okay, and again, I know we can't get into detail because it's a long road, but what you're planning is prior to everything we've ever seen in the Star Wars universe. So that gives you free reign, which again,
woo-hoo! Yes, that is not even, when I talk to some of the the Star Wars clerics who keep track of all these timelines, I was like, so when would this have happened? And they were like 25,000 years before Episode 1. And I was like, oh, I was looking for some distance, but that's distance.
If we have to go back that far, we'll do it. If that gives me what I need,
I'll do it. I might find Charlton Heston in an abandoned subway station with some apes, but I'll do it. The reality for me was that feeling of space, pun not intended, but apropos, was something that I felt was really important, not to get away from, again, fan service or the intricacies of what George had set up and dreamed of, but to just have the space to tell a story and not be instantly encumbered with the bases you have to hit.
Yep.
Which honestly, there's no way to explain it to folks other than to say it's like that game we played as kids, Twister. If at a certain point you're in a tangle, and because you just are trying to kind of find a way to tell a story with your in so many constraints that you can't.
I would imagine you interacted. Correct if I'm wrong. Did you interact with George on the indie film, and have you talked to him at all about what you're planning for Star Wars?
I have not had a chance to talk to him at all about what I'm thinking on this. He was involved and read the script and was a Ford Ferrari fan, I'm told. And
nice.
But it'd be very interesting to talk to him. I mean, I'm very protective of myself in the sense of like even describing meeting Bob Dylan in relation to the Dylan film. I like to have my shit together before I get into those kinds of situations, because there's every good idea skates at the very edge of being precipitously awful, so that every safe idea never gets toward that edge. So the trick is always to develop your idea enough that your compatriots and consultants and mentors can understand how you're avoiding going over the edge,
right?
As not just daring it. And obviously, as a writer, I am on strike right now, so those solutions and that process is not going to happen right now.
We do know, last thing on Star Wars, that we do know that this is about basically the dawn of the Force, the discovery of the Force. I mean, am I going to hear the word Jedi or midichlorian in your movie?
I don't want to make any guarantees one way or another, but it will be before Jedi, meaning you might be experiencing something that might become Jedi.
Got it.
But they Despite the fact other people make movies other ways, I don't tend to think people brand themselves before they've actually found themselves. So you don't come up a name for your organization because
Let's call it the
you know.
Force. What I just experienced.
And then let's put this big thing on our chest.
Right.
I tend to think that the branding tends to happen later.
Fair enough. And yet one more project I do want to mention. Again, I expect very early days, but you're a Swamp Thing fan. I take it. Does that go way back? It goes
way back. And basically, the second I heard that DC was going through some leadership convulsion, and James was taking over, I just saw it as an opportunity to throw my hat down in the most. I mean, I just called them and I said, in all the stuff you're doing, if the idea of me making a kind of gothic horror film origin story of Swamp Thing fits in, tell me. And I go, I you know, it's no different speech than anyone else gets with me. I don't have any agenda for a universe. I'm not building towards someone joining in some future. Have at it. But I'd just be interested in telling. I've always been interested in doing a version of Frankenstein, basically, and yet I feel like, you know, It's Alive has been done enough. So but Swamp Thing always occurred to me as kind of this wonderful version of a kind of Frankenstein story, much in the way, you know, one of my favorite pop films of growing up, RoboCop, the original one, is such a, you know, this guy who just wakes up and he's been turned into, he finds he's become this kind of machine. Also something that I was fascinated with Logan, obviously, but to me, the idea of making kind of almost a kind of noir mystery horror film about a guy who wakes up, and he's this thing, and there's an amnesiac quality of like, how did I get here and who did this to me? And so I'm envisioning kind of a horror noir film following a creature that can't be seen, trying to piece together from fragments of memory what happened and who did it.
I can see why James Gunn said yes. That's intriguing.
And none of this runs counter, obviously, to the Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson and all the great work that went on, which I mean, it's not like I'm just framing it up in a kind of new movie context, but that's all they were exploring in these comics, and so beautifully.
It's presumptuous to talk rating before you've even written a script, but does the nature of that kind of material necessitate in your mind potentially an R rating? Has that even come up in conversation?
It hasn't come up in conversations. And I think that, you know, my favorite thing about, we've probably talked about this before, but my favorite thing about rated R isn't that I can say fuck or that we can show naked people or more blood, which all obviously happens, can happen with that rating. But then when you make a rated R movie, the entire marketing apparatus of a studio understands that they cannot dream on this particular picture of action figures, lunchboxes, and special tie-ins to get children to this movie. And it changes the way the script is perceived, meaning that, you know, like, to use an example in Logan, pretty early on in the picture, there's I think it's almost an 8-minute scene between Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman inside that
silo,
water tower. That you can't do an 8-minute scene between two men over 40, entirely dialogue, one of them in a wheelchair talking about their past in a movie that's designed for, you know,
that action figure set doesn't sell a lot.
It's not it doesn't seem, your studio is going to go, I don't know, Fast X seems like it's speaking more my language. But the reality is the rating suddenly creates tremendous space.
Yep.
Even if you're not using the rating for what it's designed for, it creates a kind of understanding of who this movie is for. And that's really a real advantage.
I'm going to let you go, but just so you know, Russell Crowe did the podcast recently. He's still ready to explore that character one more time from 310 to Yuma.
I love it. I love it. I actually had a whole idea that I had this whole idea that he was going to circle back to their house, and kind of, I had an idea of a scene where Logan Lerman wakes up and he hears something, and he comes out to the front porch and someone's kind of cut some firewood or something, and he sees, Russell riding off like that he has this, because I always thought Russell was pretty attracted to Christian's wife in that picture, and Gretchen
Right.
Mol, who, how could you not be? But I love Russell, and I love to hear it, but no more universe building. Let's just
I
make
gotcha.
the original thing.
Make your Dylan movie.
Okay.
Congratulations, man. Look, we didn't even get to Copland, one of my favorites of yours. Let's have a longer conference. Maybe one of those anniversaries. I'd love to dig deep into the history of that one. Congratulations, though. Look, the bar of difficulty was insane on this, and you really delivered. It's so satisfying, and a truly great send-off to one of the best characters of all time.
It's also a great personal experience, I have to say. There's that old adage, don't meet your heroes, but this experience proved it wrong. I had such a great time with everyone involved. Stephen has been such a wonderful, supportive, paternal figure to me making this movie. And John Williams is one of the most inspiring humans I've ever met in my life. Just the kindest, most wonderful Queen's jazz player who somehow got the chance to become maestro to the world, and through tremendous talent, and is just also remains one of the most childlike and charmed and artistic people I've ever met. So it's been just a joy.
Amazing. Bonus points for that. Congrats again, man. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, buddy.
Be good.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Yep, you too.
And so ends another edition of Happy, Sad, Confused. Remember to review, rate, and subscribe to this show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm a big podcast person. I'm Daisy Ridley, and I definitely wasn't pressured to do this by Josh.